The bitter wind of Drelis whistled through the narrow alleyways, carrying with it the acrid scent of engine exhaust and desperation. Jack Reimer pulled his worn military coat tighter around his shoulders as he navigated the maze of shipping containers and maintenance tunnels that formed the underbelly of New Serenity Port. The artificial night had descended 4 hours ago, but sleep was a luxury he couldn't afford with 3 more shipments to broker before the trade satellites realigned at dawn. 20 years of service in the Colonial Defense Force had left their mark on Jack. His weathered face bore the scars of battles fought on distant worlds, but it was his eyes that told the deeper story. Gray like the storms of his homeworld Earth, they held a weariness that went beyond physical exhaustion. At 42, he'd seen enough of the galaxy's cruelty to know that kindness was often repaid with betrayal, trust with deception. The port district never truly slept. Overhead, the constant hum of cargo shuttles competed with the distant wail of security sirens. Neon advertisements for pleasure dens and narcotic lounges bathed the grimy streets in sickly colors, while shadows moved between pools of light, some hunting, others hunted. Jack had learned to walk the thin line between them, neither predator nor prey, just another ghost in the machine of galactic commerce. He was checking the manifest on his wrist display when he heard it, a sound so out of place in this urban wasteland that it made him freeze mid-step. It was soft, almost imperceptible beneath the industrial din, but unmistakable, the whimper of a child. Jack's hand instinctively moved to the plasma pistol concealed beneath his coat. Children had no business in the port district after dark. Those who ended up here rarely did so by choice, and their presence usually meant trouble, slavers, organ harvesters, or worse. He'd learned long ago not to get involved in other people's misery. The galaxy was vast and cruel, and one man couldn't change that. But the sound came again, weaker this time, and something in its desperate quality stirred a memory he'd buried deep. Another child, another alley, another life he'd failed to save. Against his better judgment, Jack followed the sound to a waste disposal unit wedged between 2 storage containers. The smell hit him first, rotting food mixed with industrial chemicals and something else, something alien and unfamiliar. In the shadows behind the unit, 2 small figures huddled together, barely visible in the dim light. They were children, but not human. Their skin had an iridescent quality that seemed to shift colors in the weak illumination, ranging from deep purple to midnight blue. Large eyes dominated their gaunt faces, eyes that reflected light like those of nocturnal predators, yet held none of their ferocity. Only fear and hunger remained. The older of the 2, perhaps 12 in human years, held the younger protectively. Both were emaciated, their alien features sharp with starvation. Torn clothing hung loose on their skeletal frames, and Jack could see they'd been scavenging. Empty nutrient packages littered the ground around them. The older one hissed at his approach, baring small, sharp teeth in a futile display of aggression. But there was no real threat there, only the desperate posturing of a creature pushed to its limits. "Easy," Jack said softly, holding up his empty hands. "I'm not going to hurt you." The universal translator in his neural implant processed his words, though he wasn't sure if these beings even had compatible technology. The older child's eyes narrowed, but the hissing stopped. Jack reached into his coat pocket slowly, careful not to make any sudden movements. His fingers found the energy bar he'd been saving for later. Real food, not the synthetic paste most spacers subsisted on. He unwrapped it and broke it in half, then tossed both pieces gently toward the children. They didn't move at first. The older one, a girl Jack guessed, watched him with those luminous eyes, clearly torn between hunger and caution. Then the younger one, who couldn't have been more than 8, let out a small whimper. The sound seemed to break something in the older child. She snatched one piece and handed it to her companion, then grabbed the other for herself. They ate with the desperate efficiency of the truly starving, and Jack's chest tightened as he watched. How long had they been out here? Were there people? "There's more," he found himself saying, reaching for his supply pouch. "Slower this time. You'll make yourselves sick." As they ate, Jack studied them more closely. They were Lanari. He was certain of it now. He'd seen members of their species before, though usually in the archives of xenobiology texts. The Lanari were rare in this sector, known for their connection to ancient technologies and their ability to interface directly with certain AI systems. Most have been scattered after the Great War, their homeworld lost to the Convergence. "You understand me?" he asked when they'd finished eating. The older girl nodded slowly. When she spoke, her voice was like silver chimes, musical despite its weakness. "Yes, we learn fast. Language is patterns. We see patterns. We're your parents." The girl's expression darkened, and the younger one pressed closer to her side. "Gone. Taken by the hunters. The ones who extract memories." Jack felt his blood chill. Memory extractors. He'd heard whispers of them in the darker corners of the galaxy. Criminals who specialized in harvesting neural patterns from species with unique cognitive abilities. The process was fatal, leaving behind empty husks while the extracted memories were sold to the highest bidder. "How long ago?" 3 cycles. "We hide since then. Move at night. Eat what we find." 3 days. These children had survived 3 days in one of the most dangerous districts in the galaxy. It was a miracle they were still alive. A sound from deeper in the alley made Jack tense. Footsteps, heavy and purposeful. His hand found his weapon again as he moved to shield the children. "Well," a gravelly voice emerged from the shadows. "What have we here?" 3 figures stepped into the weak light. Humans by their build, but heavily augmented. Cybernetic implants gleamed dully where flesh should have been, and their eyes held the flat, predatory look of professional hunters. Jack recognized the type immediately. Bounty hunters, the kind who asked no questions and showed no mercy. "Move along," Jack said evenly. "Nothing here concerns you." The lead hunter smiled, revealing teeth filed to points. "Oh, but I think it does. Those little ones match a description we've been tracking." Very valuable description. Jack's grip tightened on his pistol. "They're under my protection now." The hunter's smile widened. "Protection? From a washed-up soldier running cargo in the ass end of the galaxy? I think not." They moved with coordinated precision, but Jack had been expecting it. His pistol cleared leather with practiced speed, the plasma bolt catching the first hunter's center mass. The man went down hard, his augmented nervous system overloaded by the energy discharge. The others scattered, seeking cover while returning fire. Jack pushed the children behind the waste unit and laid down suppressing fire, his military training taking over. The alley erupted in light and sound as energy weapons discharged, leaving scorch marks on metal and concrete. "Run," he shouted to the girls. "Back exit 2 alleys down. Go." But they didn't move. The older girl clutched something to her chest, a crystal of some kind that pulsed with inner light. The younger one had her hands pressed against it, her eyes closed in concentration. A bolt singed past Jack's ear, and he returned fire, dropping another hunter. But more were coming. He could hear their footsteps, see their shadows moving in his peripheral vision. Too many. Then the crystal flared bright, and everything changed. The younger girl's eyes snapped open, glowing with the same inner light as the crystal. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that seemed to resonate in Jack's bones. "Stop." It wasn't a command or a plea. It was simply a statement of fact, as if she were describing the weather. And impossibly, terrifyingly, the hunters obeyed. They froze mid-stride, weapons half raised, their augmented bodies locked in place by some force Jack couldn't comprehend. The girl's nose began to bleed, dark purple against her pale skin. Her sister caught her as she swayed, the crystal's light dimming. "Sari," the older girl cried. "Sari, no. It's too much." Jack didn't waste time trying to understand what had happened. He scooped up both children, the younger one barely conscious, and ran. Behind them, he could hear the hunters beginning to move again, their confusion buying precious seconds. The port district blurred past as Jack navigated the labyrinth of back alleys and service tunnels he'd memorized over years of operating in the shadows. His military augmentations kicked in, boosting his speed and endurance, but the children were dead weight in his arms. He reached his safe house, a converted maintenance bay hidden behind a false wall in an abandoned factory complex, just as the first sirens began to wail. The security door sealed behind them with a pneumatic hiss, and Jack set the children down gently on a makeshift cot. Medical supplies, he muttered, pulling a field kit from a storage locker. Let me see her. The younger girl, Sari, was unconscious but breathing. Her pulse was rapid and erratic, and her skin felt hot to the touch. The older girl hovered anxiously as Jack administered a broad-spectrum stabilizer. She pushed too hard, the girl whispered. The memory seed, it's not meant for someone so young. Memory seed? Jack looked at the crystal she still clutched. It pulsed weakly like a dying heart. Our legacy, the knowledge of our people. Father was taking it to the sanctuary when the hunters found us. Tears tracked silver down her cheeks. I'm Rena. This is my sister Sari. She's special. She can hear the voices in the seed. Jack finished his medical scan and sat back on his heels. She'll be okay. She needs rest and proper nutrition. Both of you do. Rena's luminous eyes fixed on him. Why did you help us? Humans. They usually don't. It was a fair question. Jack had asked himself the same thing as they ran. The smart move would have been to walk away, to let the hunters claim their prize. He'd survived this long by not getting involved, by keeping his head down and his conscience quiet. But looking at these two children, seeing the fierce way Rena protected her younger sister, even in the face of death, something long dormant stirred in his chest. Because someone should have, he said simply. The safe house fell quiet save for the hum of climate controls and the distant rumble of the port. Jack set about making the space more comfortable, pulling out emergency rations and water, finding blankets that weren't too musty. All the while his mind raced. The memory extractors would come for them. The hunters were just the first wave, hired guns following a bounty alert. But whoever wanted these children and their crystal wouldn't give up easily. And now Jack had made himself a target. He should have felt regret, fear, anger at his own foolishness. Instead, watching Rena carefully spoon water into her sister's mouth, he felt something else entirely. Purpose. As the artificial night wore on, Jack began to plan. He had contacts throughout the sector, smugglers, information brokers, people who owed him favors. If he was going to protect these children, he needed to understand what they were carrying and why it was worth killing for. The memory seed sat on the table between them, its inner light pulsing in rhythm with Sari's breathing. Whatever secrets it held, whatever knowledge the Lenari had died to protect, it was now his responsibility too. Jack Reimer had spent 20 years as a soldier and another 5 as a merchant, always looking out for himself, always staying one step ahead of his past. But sometimes he realized the galaxy gave you a chance to be something more. Sometimes it started with nothing more than sharing a meal with 2 starving children in a dark alley. Sometimes that was enough to change everything. The comm unit in the corner crackled to life, startling Jack from his planning. He recognized the voice immediately. Talus, a hacker he'd worked with on several less-than-legal operations. The man's cybernetic augmentations had left him partially paralyzed, but his mind was sharper than any AI Jack had encountered. Jack, you've stirred up a nexus of trouble, my friend. The entire port's crawling with hunters. Whatever you've gotten involved with, it's big. Jack moved to the comm unit, keeping his voice low. I need information, Talus. Lenari children, something called a memory seed. Ring any bells? There was a long pause, then a whistle of appreciation. Memory seeds are legend, Jack. Supposed to be extinct, like most Lenari tech. If someone's hunting for one, we're talking about the kind of power that reshapes civilizations. I need more than legends. Give me 6 hours. And Jack, whatever you do, don't let that seed activate fully. The last time one did, it woke up things better left sleeping. The connection cut, leaving Jack with more questions than answers. He turned back to find Rena watching him with those unsettling eyes. You're afraid now, she said. It wasn't a question. Cautious, Jack corrected. There's a difference. Father said the same thing. Before they took him, she looked down at her sleeping sister. He said the seed would summon the fleet. But the fleet is gone, destroyed in the Great War. Everyone knows this. Jack pulled up a chair, his joints protesting after the night's exertions. Tell me about your father. What was he doing with the seed? Rena was quiet for so long Jack thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of ancient stories passed down through generations. We are the last of the Keeper family. For 1,000 years, our line has protected the seeds, waiting for the time of reawakening. Father said the other families were gone, hunted, scattered, or hiding so deep they forgot who they were. But we remembered. She reached out to touch the crystal, and it pulsed brighter in response. The seeds are alive in their way. They hold not just information, but consciousness, the collective memory of our people. And more, the ancients, the ones who came before. They built the fleet, created the first AIs, established the network that once connected all thinking beings. When the Great War came, they sealed their knowledge in the seeds and sent them to the Keeper families. Jack leaned forward, his soldier's instincts prickling. And someone wants that knowledge now. The memory extractors serve the hierarchs. They rule through control of information, keeping the galaxy fragmented and ignorant. If the seeds activate, if the old network awakens, their power ends. Jack finished. Rena nodded. Father was taking us to the sanctuary, a place where the seeds could be safely awakened. But they found us first. And Sari? You said she's special. She was born connected. Most Lenari need years of training to interface with a seed. Sari could do it from birth. Father said she was prophesied, the bridge walker, the one who would reconnect what was severed. Jack rubbed his eyes, feeling the weight of exhaustion settling in. He'd stumbled into something far bigger than a simple rescue. The smart thing would be to find somewhere safe to leave the girls and disappear. But looking at them, Rena's fierce determination, Sari's vulnerable form, he knew he'd already passed that point. Get some rest, he told Rena. We'll move at first light. Where will we go? Jack managed a tired smile. To find a sanctuary of yours. But first, we need to get off this rock alive. The next few hours passed in tense preparation. Jack gathered supplies, weapons, and currency from his various caches throughout the safe house. He had enough to get them off-world, but after that, things would get complicated. The port would be locked down by morning, and every bounty hunter in the sector would be converging on Drellis 4. He was checking his gear when Sari stirred, her eyes fluttering open. They glowed faintly in the dim light, and when she looked at Jack, he had the unsettling feeling she was seeing more than just his physical form. You're scared, she said softly, but not for yourself. Your sister said the same thing. Must be a family trait. Sari sat up slowly, wincing. The seed showed me things. The hunters are coming. Many of them. But there's a path, a way through the storm. What kind of path? The girl's expression grew distant. Down, into the old mining tunnels. There's a man there, living in the dark. He knew our father. He can help. Jack frowned. The mining tunnels beneath the port were a lawless maze, home to outcasts, fugitives, and worse. But if Sari had genuinely seen something, did the seed show you his name? Corbin Rees, the Keeper of Echoes. Rena gasped. That's impossible. Corbin Rees died in the Purge. Father told us stories. Father was wrong, Sari said with quiet certainty. He lives. He waits. He remembers. Jack made his decision. Then that's where we go. Can you walk? Sari nodded, though Jack could see the effort it took for her to stand. He fashioned a makeshift sling to carry the memory seed, its weight surprising for such a small object. Whatever it was made of, it wasn't ordinary crystal. They left the safe house as the artificial dawn began to lighten the sky. Jack had mapped out a route through the maintenance tunnels that would take them to the old mining sector while avoiding the main thoroughfares. With luck, they could reach the tunnels before the hunters coordinated their search. Luck, as usual, had other plans. They were 3 levels down when the first patrol found them. Jack heard the footsteps echoing through the metal corridors and quickly ushered the girls into an alcove. The hunters passed within meters of their position, close enough that Jack could hear their augmented breathing. Sector 7 clear. One of them reported into a comm unit. Moving to 8. Jack waited until the footsteps faded, then motioned for the girls to follow. They made it another 2 levels before the alarm klaxon started. A port-wide alert that meant someone had found his safe house. "Run," he told the girls, abandoning stealth for speed. The maintenance tunnels became a blur of rusted metal and flickering lights. Jack's neural map guided them through the maze, but he could hear pursuit converging from multiple directions. The hunters were coordinating, using the port's own security systems to track their movement. They burst out onto a cargo platform just as a squad of hunters emerged from the opposite corridor. Jack shoved the girls behind a loading crane and opened fire, his plasma bolts forcing the hunters to seek cover. The shaft. Rena pointed to an old elevator shaft, its doors wedged partially open. The mining levels. It was a 20-meter drop into darkness. Jack could see maintenance ladders bolted to the walls, but they were corroded with age and neglect. Behind them, more hunters were arriving, their weapons lighting up the platform with deadly energy. "Hold on to me," Jack ordered, wrapping one arm around each girl. His military augmentations included limited gravitic compensation, enough to slow a fall but not to fly. It would have to do. He jumped. The darkness swallowed them, wind rushing past as they plummeted. Jack activated his augmentations, feeling the strain as they fought against gravity. The fall slowed, but not enough. They hit the bottom hard, Jack taking the brunt of the impact. Pain shot through his leg as something cracked. He bit back a curse and pushed himself up, adrenaline masking the worst of it. They were in the mining tunnels now, ancient passages carved into the rock beneath the port city. "This way," Sari whispered, her eyes glowing brighter in the absolute darkness. She seemed to know exactly where she was going, leading them through passages that hadn't seen light in decades. The tunnels were a testament to forgotten industry. Massive boring machines sat rusted in place, their drill heads like the maws of metal monsters. Crystalline formations jutted from the walls, worthless minerals that had been ignored in favor of more valuable ores. They walked for what felt like hours, Jack's injured leg protesting with each step. The girls were exhausted, but they pressed on without complaint. Finally, Sari stopped at what looked like a solid wall of rock. "Here," she said, pressing her hand against the stone. The wall shimmered and dissolved, revealing a hidden chamber beyond. Holographic camouflage, Jack realized, technology far too advanced for simple miners. The chamber was lived in, but not comfortable. Makeshift furniture cobbled together from salvage, walls lined with screens displaying streams of data. And in the center, an old man sat in a hover chair, his body withered but his eyes sharp and clear. "Sari, Rena." His voice was like gravel in a metal drum. "I've been waiting for you." Corbin Reese was not what Jack had expected. The stories painted him as a warrior scholar, one of the great Lenari teachers. This man looked like he'd been dying for decades, but was too stubborn to finish the job. "Your father spoke of you often," Corbin continued. He knew this day might come, the day the hierarchs finally found what they were looking for. "You knew our father?" Rena asked. "Knew him? Child, I trained him, taught him the old ways, prepared him for his role as keeper." Corbin's gaze shifted to the memory seed. "And now that burden passes to you, earlier than it should have, but the galaxy rarely asks our permission for its cruelties." Jack stepped forward, his patience wearing thin. "We need a way off-world. The entire port is locked down, and there are enough bounty hunters up there to start a small war." Corbin laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Off-world? Boy, you're thinking too small. You carry the last memory seed, the key to awakening the lunar fleet. Running won't save you, or the galaxy." "The fleet is destroyed," Jack said. "Everyone knows. Everyone knows what the hierarchs want them to know," Corbin interrupted. "The fleet wasn't destroyed. It was hidden, locked away in folded space, waiting for the seeds to call a home." He gestured to the screens around them. "For 50 years, I've monitored the old frequencies, kept watch for signs of the reawakening. The other seeds are gone, destroyed or corrupted. This one," he pointed at the crystal, "is the last hope." "But it's too dangerous," Rena protested. "Sari almost died, just from a partial activation. To fully awaken it, would require a focusing array, ancient technology built into the foundations of the old Lenari colonies. Corbin's chair hummed as he moved to a console. There's a station in the desolation fields, abandoned but intact. If you can reach it, if you can activate the array. The hierarchs will never allow it, Jack said. No, they'll send everything they have to stop you, which is why you need more than luck and good intentions. Corbin pressed a series of commands, and a section of wall slid open. Beyond was an armory that would have made a military commander weep with envy. Help yourself. You'll need every advantage you can get. As Jack selected weapons and equipment, his mind raced. This morning he'd been a simple trader, concerned with profit margins and cargo manifests. Now he was apparently part of a conspiracy to overthrow the galactic order. Why? He asked Corbin. Why does this matter so much? What's so important about waking up an old fleet? Corbin's expression grew distant. The Great War wasn't what the histories claim. It wasn't about territory or resources. It was about knowledge, specifically who would control it. The ancients created a network, a vast web of shared consciousness that connected all thinking beings. No secrets, no lies, no manipulation. Pure understanding. The hierarchs couldn't allow that. They engineered the war, turned allies against each other, shattered the network. Then they rewrote history, made themselves the saviors instead of the destroyers. And the fleet, the last guardians of the true history. The ships are more than weapons. They're libraries, archives of everything the hierarchs tried to erase. If they return, the truth returns with them. Jack. Finished. Exactly. And truth, young man, is the most dangerous weapon in the galaxy. Sari had been quiet throughout the exchange, but now she moved to one of the screens. Her hand touched the surface, and data began flowing faster, patterns emerging in the chaos. I can see them, she whispered. The ships. They're singing in the dark, waiting for us to remember the song. The memory seed pulsed brighter, and every screen in the chamber flickered. For a moment, Jack saw them too, massive vessels hidden between the folds of reality, their hulls inscribed with equations that bent space-time itself. The harmonics are aligning, Corbin breathed. She's more powerful than even her father knew. Alarms suddenly shrilled through the chamber. Corbin's fingers flew over his console, bringing up security feeds from the tunnels. They found us, he announced grimly. Faster than I expected. The hierarchs must have deployed seekers. Jack checked his new weapons, military-grade plasma rifles, shield generators, even a portable siege cannon. How many? Too many. They're converging from 3 directions. Corbin turned to the children. There's another way out. An old transit capsule that connects to the magnetic catapult. It can launch you directly to the desolation fields, but what? It's one way, and it hasn't been tested in 30 years. Jack looked at the girls. Rena stood protectively near her sister, fear and determination warring in her expression. Sari seemed almost serene, as if she could see an outcome the rest of them couldn't. Do it, Jack decided. Get them to the capsule. What about you? Rena asked. Someone needs to hold them off. Buy you time to reach the station. No. Sari's voice was quiet but firm. We go together or not at all. The seed showed me. You're part of this now. Part of the pattern. Before Jack could argue, explosions rocked the chamber. The hunters had brought heavy weapons. Chunks of rock fell from the ceiling as shaped charges detonated in the tunnels outside. Go, Corbin shouted, his chair racing toward a hidden panel. All of you. I'll hold them here. You can barely move. Jack protested. Corbin smiled, and for a moment, Jack saw the warrior he'd once been. Boy, I've been preparing for this moment for 50 years. You think I don't have surprises of my own? The panel opened, revealing the transit capsule, a sleek, dart-shaped vehicle designed for the magnetic transit system that once connected the mining complexes. Corbin's fingers danced over the controls, bringing dormant systems online. The catapult will fire automatically once you're clear. The capsule has supplies for a week, and the coordinates are already programmed. He gripped Jack's arm. Protect them. Both of them. Sari is the key, but Rena, Rena will be the leader the galaxy needs when this is over. More explosions shook the chamber. Through the smoke and debris, Jack could see figures advancing, hunters in full combat armor, led by something that wasn't quite human anymore. A seeker, more machine than flesh, its multiple eyes glowing with predatory intelligence. "Go!" Corbin roared. Jack hustled the girls into the capsule, diving in after them as plasma fire erupted behind them. The hatch sealed automatically, and acceleration pressed them into the seats as the capsule shot into the transit tube. Through the rear viewport, Jack saw Corbin's last stand. The old man's chair had transformed into a weapons platform, energy shields flickering as he returned fire. Hidden turrets emerged from the walls, turning the chamber into a killing field. But there were too many of them. As the capsule gained speed, Jack saw the Seeker break through Corbin's defenses, its blade arms reaching for the old warrior. Then they were gone, hurtling through darkness at speeds that made the capsule's hull groan. The girls were silent, processing the loss of yet another protector. The memory seed pulsed between them, its light painting their faces in shifting hues. "He knew," Sari said finally. "He knew he wouldn't leave that chamber. But he also knew we would succeed." "How can you be sure?" Jack asked. She smiled, the expression too old for her young face. "Because the song is getting louder. The fleet knows we're coming." The magnetic catapult engaged with a sound like thunder. The capsule erupted from the mountain slope, arcing high over the desolation fields. For a moment, they were flying, the brutal landscape spreading beneath them like a map of ancient catastrophe. Then gravity reasserted itself, and they were falling toward the unknown. The desolation fields earned their name. Once, this had been a thriving colony world, terraformed and cultivated by the Lenari at the height of their civilization. Now it was a wasteland of crystallized sand and electromagnetic storms, the aftermath of weapons that had torn holes in reality itself. The capsule's landing was rough but survivable. Jack checked their position on the navigation system. They were still 300 kilometers from the station, with no vehicle and limited supplies. "We'll have to walk," he announced, distributing gear from the capsule's emergency stores. "Stay close. The storms here can strip flesh from bone." They set out across the crystal desert as the binary suns reached their zenith. The landscape was alien and hostile, towering formations of fused glass catching and refracting light into deadly laser-like beams, patches of sand that hummed with residual energy from weapons discharged decades ago. The memory seed served as both burden and guide. Sari carried it now, wrapped in a dampening cloth to muffle its increasingly powerful emanations. Every few hours she would stop, close her eyes, and adjust their course based on visions only she could see. By the second day, Jack's leg was in agony. The medical nanites in his system were fighting a losing battle against the infection spreading from the fracture. He hit it as best he could, but Rena noticed his limp growing worse. "You're hurt," she said during one of their rest stops. "I'll manage." "No, you won't." She placed her small hand on his leg, and Jack felt a strange warmth spreading through the limb. The pain receded, not completely, but enough to matter. "How?" "All Lenari can manipulate energy to some degree. I'm not very good at it, but I can help a little." Jack studied her with new respect. These children continued to surprise him. "Thank you." As they traveled, Rena shared more of her people's history. The Lenari weren't native to this galaxy. They were descendants of colonists from another reality entirely, refugees from a universe where the laws of physics operated differently. The ancients had helped them adapt, teaching them to work with the cosmic forces of this dimension. "That's why we can interface with their technology," she explained. "We see the universe as patterns and harmonics, not just matter and energy. The memory seeds are tuned to our perception." On the third day, they encountered the first guardian. It rose from the sand without warning, a construct of living metal and frozen light, its form shifting between geometric configurations that hurt to look at directly. Jack pushed the girls behind him and raised his plasma rifle, but the weapon felt inadequate against such a thing. The construct spoke in frequencies that bypassed the ears and resonated directly in their minds. Who seeks the station? Who carries the seed? Sari stepped forward before Jack could stop her. I'm Sari of the Keeper line. I carry the last seed. The time of reawakening has come. The construct's form stabilized, resolving into something almost humanoid. The Bridgewalker. You are early. The harmonics are not fully aligned. The hierarchs forced our hand. They hunt us even now. Then you must be tested. The station will not open for the unworthy. The air shimmered, and suddenly they were no longer in the desert. They stood in a vast chamber of impossible architecture, where stairs led in all directions and gravity was negotiable. The construct waited at the center, patient as eternity. Each must face their truth. Each must choose their path. Jack found himself alone, standing in a recreation of that alley from 20 years ago. The child was there again, his squad mate's daughter, caught in the crossfire of a conflict she didn't understand. But this time, he could save her. This time, he could make the right choice. It's not real, he told himself, but his hands shook as he reached for her. Reality is perception, the construct's voice echoed. What matters is not what is, but what you choose. Jack made his choice. He saved the child, accepted the court-martial that followed, bore the disgrace that ended his military career. And in accepting that alternate path, something broke free inside him, the weight he'd carried for 2 decades. When the vision cleared, Rena was facing her own trial. Jack saw her standing before 2 paths, one leading to power and safety for herself, the other to sacrifice for the greater good. She chose sacrifice without hesitation. But it was Sari's test that shook the foundations of the chamber. She stood before the entirety of the lunar fleet, the massive vessels arrayed in all their terrible glory. In her hands, the memory seed pulsed with power enough to wake them, to summon them back to reality. But she also saw the cost, the lives that would be lost in the war that followed, the civilizations that would fall as truth battled lies. Heavy is the crown of knowledge, the construct intoned. Will you wake the sleeping giants, knowing the chaos they will bring? Or will you let the lie continue, preserving peace at the cost of freedom? Sari looked at the seed, then at Jack and Rena. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of prophecy. Truth is not kind, but lies are cancer. I choose the pain of healing over the comfort of disease. She lifted the seed high, and its light blazed forth like a new sun. The vision shattered. They were back in the desert, but the landscape had changed. Before them rose the station, a spire of crystallized energy reaching toward the heavens, its surface covered in equations that rewrote themselves as they watched. You have chosen, the construct said, its form beginning to discorporate. The station aufweites. But know this, the hierarchs are already moving. Their greatest weapons converge on this place. You have little time. It vanished like morning mist, leaving them alone before the station's entrance. The interior of the station defied conventional physics. Corridors folded back on themselves. Rooms existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, and time itself seemed fluid. Sari led them unerringly through the maze, the memory seed growing brighter with each step. They reached the central chamber as alarms began shrieking throughout the structure. Jack checked his weapons. They were down to their last energy cells, and his injuries were slowing him despite Rena's healing. The focusing array was beautiful and terrible, a cathedral of light and mathematics where reality became malleable. At its heart was a cradle designed for the memory seed, surrounded by control surfaces that responded to thought as much as touch. How long will activation take? Jack asked. Sari was already moving toward the cradle. Once it begins, the process can't be stopped. But we'll take time for the harmonic cascade to build. Time we don't have, Rena said, pointing to the displays showing multiple ships converging on their position. The hierarchs brought a battle fleet. Jack assessed their tactical situation. The station had defenses, but they were designed for a different era of warfare. Against modern hierarch dreadnoughts, they wouldn't last long. Start the activation, he ordered. I'll hold the entrance. You can't fight a fleet alone, Rena protested. I won't be alone. He looked at them both, these remarkable children who had changed his life in a matter of days. I've been running from my past for 20 years. Time to stop running. Sari placed the memory seed in its cradle. The moment it made contact, the station came alive. Energy cascaded through the structure, and somewhere in the depths of folded space, ancient systems began to wake. The first wave of hierarch troops breached the station's outer defenses. Jack met them at a choke point 3 levels down, using the station's own geometry against them. Corridors that existed in multiple dimensions made perfect kill zones, and Jack had learned to trust Sari's intuitive understanding of the layout. But there were so many of them. Elite shock troops, augmented with the best technology the hierarchs could provide, led by seekers that seemed to predict his every move. Jack fell back level by level, trading space for time. In the central chamber, the activation continued. Sari stood at the heart of the array, her small form outlined in coruscating energy as she conducted a symphony only she could hear. Rena worked frantically at the control surfaces, following her sister's translated instructions. "The harmonics are building," Rena reported, "but the seed needs more power. The station's reactors aren't enough." "Then we give it more," Sari said simply. She pressed both hands against the seed, and Jack heard her scream as energy poured from her into the crystal. The station shuddered. Throughout the desolation fields, dormant systems activated. Ancient weapons platforms rose from the sand, targeting the hierarch fleet. The battle in space intensified as the hierarchs realized they were running out of time. Jack had fallen back to the entrance of the central chamber. His ammunition was exhausted, his body running on stimulants and determination. A seeker led the final assault, a nightmare fusion of flesh and machinery that moved like liquid death. "You cannot stop the inevitable," it said in a voice like grinding gears. "The child will die. The seed will be silenced. Order will prevail." Jack smiled, blood running from a dozen wounds. "You're wrong about one thing. She's not just a child. She's hope. And hope is harder to kill than you think." He triggered the last of his explosives, bringing down the entrance in a cascade of rubble. It wouldn't stop them for long, but maybe long enough. In the chamber, Sari's scream had become a song. Wordless, beautiful, and terrible. The memory seed blazed like a captive star, its light beginning to tear holes in reality itself. "It's working," Rena breathed. "The fleet. They're responding." Through the station's sensors, they could see it happening. Rifts opening in space as massive vessels emerged from their hidden dimensions. The lunar fleet in all its glory, ships that looked like crystallized mathematics, weapons that fired concepts rather than projectiles. But Sari was fading. The power required was consuming her, burning through her small form like fire through paper. Sari stopped. Rena reached for her sister, but the energy field repelled her. "You're killing yourself." Sari turned to look at her, and her eyes were full of stars. "Some songs are worth finishing." The Seekers broke through Jack's barricade. He met them with bare hands and desperate courage, but he was only human. They overwhelmed him, cast him aside like a broken toy. The lead Seeker reached for the memory seed, and Sari smiled. The activation completed in a burst of light that could be seen from orbit. The harmonic cascade reached its crescendo, and across the galaxy, every remaining memory seed fragment resonated in sympathy. The network, dormant for generations, blazed back to life. The Seeker's hand never reached the seed. It froze, its mechanical parts seized by command from a higher authority. All around the station, hierarch technology began to fail as the truth spread through their systems. The real history they had worked so hard to suppress. The lunar fleet engaged the hierarch dreadnoughts. It wasn't even a battle. Ships that had perfected warfare when humans were still discovering fire swept aside the hierarch's best efforts like a giant brushing away insects. But the real victory was quieter. Across thousands of worlds, minds touched by the reawakened network began to remember. Lies carefully cultivated over generations withered in the light of recovered truth. The hierarch's power, built on deception and information control, crumbled like a house of cards. In the station's medical bay, Jack drifted between consciousness and dream. His body was broken, but healing, tended by medical systems more advanced than anything in the modern galaxy. Through the haze of recovery, he saw Rena sitting beside Ceri's bed. The younger girl had survived, but at a cost. Her connection to the memory seed had changed her fundamentally. She spoke now in harmonics that carried multiple meanings, saw patterns in time that others couldn't perceive. She saw all of this, Rena told Jack when he finally woke fully. Every choice, every sacrifice. She knew what it would cost, and she chose it anyway. She said the future was worth the price. That hope was worth the pain. Jack looked out the viewport at the transformed galaxy. Lenari's ships patrolled the spaceways, not as conquerors, but as teachers. The network was rebuilding, bringing understanding where there had been suspicion, cooperation where there had been conflict. What happens now, he asked. Rena smiled. Not the frightened child he'd found in an alley, but a young leader learning to bear the weight of destiny. Now we rebuild. Not just the network, but trust. The hierarchs ruled through fear and secrets. We'll lead through openness and truth. And where do I fit in all this? Wherever you choose. Ceri says you're part of the pattern now, woven into the harmony. The galaxy needs healers as much as warriors. Jack thought about that as he watched Ceri working with the memory seed, teaching others how to interface with the network. The bitter, isolated soldier who had found them in that alley seemed like someone from another life. I gave them food, he murmured. Just a simple act of kindness. The smallest actions can have the greatest consequences, Rena replied. Ceri calls it the butterfly theorem, tiny changes that reshape the universe. Months later, Jack stood in a very different alley. This one was in the refugee sector of New Harmony, one of the first cities built on the principles of the restored network. He watched as Rena addressed a crowd of displaced beings, victims of the hierarch's fall, struggling to find their place in the new order. Ceri sat nearby, the memory seed floating gently above her palm. She no longer needed the physical crystal. She had become something more, a living bridge between the material and the quantum. But she kept it as a reminder of where the journey began. The speech ended, and the sisters made their way through the crowd, touching hands, offering comfort, sharing hope. They found Jack by the food distribution center, handing out meals to those who needed them. Still feeding the hungry, Rena asked with a smile. Someone has to. The galaxy's full of starving children. Ceri looked at him with those impossible eyes, seeing futures that branched and converged like a living tree. And any one of them could change everything. That's the beautiful mystery of it all. Jack passed a nutrient pack to a small amphibian child, remembering another dark night, another desperate choice. You gave me purpose, he said to the sisters. Showed me that one person can make a difference. You showed us first, Rena replied. In that alley, when you chose compassion over indifference. The network calls it the first harmony, the moment when the pattern of change began. As the artificial sun set over New Harmony, painting the sky in shades of hope, Jack continued his work. Somewhere in the galaxy, the lunar fleet stood guard against those who would return to the old ways. The network grew stronger each day, connecting minds and hearts across the vast distances. And in countless small acts of kindness, a meal shared, a hand extended, a choice to help rather than turn away, the future wrote itself one moment at a time. The human had fed two starving alien sisters. He never expected what they gave in return, not just the transformation of a galaxy, but the redemption of his own soul. In saving them, he had saved himself. In feeding their bodies, he had nourished hope itself. And hope, as Ceri had shown them all, was the most powerful force in the universe. The revolution hadn't ended with the fall of the hierarchs. If anything, it had only begun. The process of rebuilding trust across a galaxy that had known only manipulation for generations was slow, often painful work. Jack found himself drawn into this effort, despite his protests that he was just a soldier and traitor. The sisters had other ideas. You understand both worlds, Rena explained during one of their planning sessions. The old ways of conflict and the new ways of connection. We need bridges, Jack. People who can translate between what was and what could be. So he became an ambassador of sorts, traveling between worlds to mediate disputes, ease transitions, and sometimes just listen to those struggling with the changing order. The memory seed had awakened more than just the fleet. It had restored suppressed memories, revealed hidden histories, exposed secrets that some would rather have kept buried. On Vertex Prime, he mediated between former hierarch administrators and the populations they had controlled. The administrators weren't evil, he discovered. Many were just bureaucrats who had believed they were maintaining order. The revelations from a network had shattered their worldview as thoroughly as anyone's. We thought we were protecting civilization, one former governor told him, her mandibles clicking with distress. The hierarchs showed us histories of what happened when information flowed too freely. Wars, chaos, collapse. We believed we were the thin line holding back disaster. Maybe you were, Jack replied, surprising her. But that's the thing about lies. Even when they serve a purpose, they eventually rot from within. The truth may be messy, but it's also stronger. Sari's transformation continued to evolve. She no longer aged in the conventional sense, existing partially outside normal space-time. Her consciousness touched the network at levels that made even veteran Lenari teachers nervous. Yet she remained, at heart, the quiet child Jack had found in that alley. "Sometimes I see too much," she confided during one of his visits to New Harmony. All the possible futures spreading out like branches, each choice creating new patterns. "It's beautiful and terrifying. How do you handle it?" She smiled, and for a moment she was just a young girl again. "I remember that first meal you gave us. Such a small thing, but it changed everything. It reminds me that the future isn't fixed. It's made of countless small kindnesses." The resistance came, as they knew it would. Not everyone welcomed the new transparency. Shadow markets emerged, dealing in privacy and secrets. Isolated systems rejected the network entirely, creating pockets of willful ignorance. Some even tried to rebuild the hierarchs' control mechanisms. Jack was on Thuro's station when the Neo-Hierarchs made their major play. A coordinated attack on network nodes across 12 systems, combined with a propaganda campaign portraying the Lenari as manipulative overlords no different from their predecessors. The attack was sophisticated, well-funded, and nearly succeeded. Network connections flickered and failed. Panic spread as populations wondered if they were witnessing the beginning of a new age of control. Jack found himself in the station's command center as the crisis peaked. He wasn't a network technician or a military commander anymore, but people still looked to him for guidance. Perhaps because he'd been there at the beginning, or perhaps because he represented something simpler, the human desire to help. "What would Sari do?" someone asked. "She'd trust the pattern," Jack replied. "The network isn't just technology, it's consciousness. And consciousness has a way of finding itself, even in the dark." He was right. The attack had an unexpected consequence. It activated dormant protective protocols in the network itself. The ancients, it seemed, had anticipated such attempts. The system began to heal itself, but more importantly, it began to teach. Those who had launched the attack found themselves connected to the memories of those they had tried to control. They experienced firsthand the fear, the loss, the desperate hope of populations under authoritarian rule. Some went mad from the empathic overload. Others emerged transformed, understanding at last what they had nearly destroyed. The crisis passed, but it left its mark. The network evolved, becoming more resilient but also more nuanced. It learned to respect the need for privacy while maintaining transparency where it mattered. It developed ethical protocols that even its creators hadn't envisioned. Years flowed by like water. Jack established a settlement on Haven, a world at the intersection of major trade routes. It became a refuge for those displaced by the changes, former soldiers, traders, even ex-hierarchs seeking redemption. He built it on a simple principle. Everyone eats, everyone contributes, everyone belongs. Rena visited often, taking breaks from her role as speaker for the Network Council. She had grown into her destiny, becoming a leader who led by example rather than authority. Under her guidance, the Lenari taught without preaching, shared without demanding, gave without expecting return. "You've built something beautiful here," she told Jack during one visit, watching children of a dozen species playing together in the central plaza. "I just made soup and shared it around. The rest sort of happened." She laughed, the sound carrying harmonics that made nearby flowers turn toward her. "That's what you always say. But Sari calls this place a temporal nexus, a point where future histories converge. Many of the galaxy's next generation of leaders will come from here. Then I better make more soup." The evening found them on Jack's terrace, overlooking the valley where Haven sprawled in organic curves. The city had been built using Lenari architectural principles, structures that grew rather than were constructed, buildings that breathed and adapted to their inhabitants' needs. "Do you ever regret it?" Rena asked. "The quiet life you had before that night in the alley?" Jack considered the question as he watched the sunset paint the sky in impossible colors. His body bore the scars of that choice, injuries that even advanced healing couldn't completely erase. He walked with a slight limp. His hair had gone gray early, and his hands sometimes shook from nerve damage. But his eyes were clear. The bitterness that had once lived there had been replaced by something rarer, contentment. "I was dying before that night," he said finally. "Not physically, but in every way that mattered. I'd forgotten who I was, why I'd once fought, what meant to care about something beyond my own survival. And now I make soup. I tell stories to children. I help people find new homes. Small things, but small things change the universe," Rena finished. Sari's first law of temporal dynamics. They sat in comfortable silence as the stars emerged. Not just the visible ones, but the network constellations that overlay reality for those connected to the system. Messages of light passing between worlds, thoughts and dreams shared across the void. "She wants to see you," Rena said eventually. "Sari, she's discovering something. Something big. She says you need to be there." "Where?" "The origin point, where the ancients first made contact with this dimension. She's been preparing for years, and now she says the time has come." Jack felt a familiar tightness in his chest. Not fear exactly, but the anticipation that comes before a great change. "When do we leave?" "Tomorrow, if you're willing." He looked out over Haven, this small paradise he'd helped create. It would continue without him. That was how he designed it. No single person was irreplaceable. No individual ego essential to its function. "I'm willing, but I'm bringing soup." The journey to the origin point took them beyond the galaxy's edge into the void between island universes. The ship was Lenari, its engines powered by principles that made conventional physics weep. Jack spent most of the voyage in the observation dome, watching reality bend around them like water around stone. Sari was waiting for them on a station that shouldn't have existed, a structure built from crystallized time, orbiting a star that burned in spectrums beyond normal perception. She had changed again, becoming something that flickered between states, sometimes solid, sometimes pure energy, always Sari. "Jack." Her voice carried warmth across impossible distances. "Thank you for coming. You said it was important." "It is. The most important thing since the reawakening. The ancients left us a gift, not just the network, but a doorway, a path to where they went when they transcended." Jack felt the station's impossible geometries pressing against his mind. "And you want to open it?" "It's already open. It's been open all along. We just couldn't see it until now." She gestured, and space folded, revealing a view that made his brain struggle to process. "They're waiting for us. All of them. The ones who came before, the ones who built the first songs, the ones who dreamed civilization into being. Why now? Why me?" Sari smiled, and in that smile was the echo of a hungry child in an alley. "Because the pattern comes full circle. Because every transcendence needs an anchor to the beginning. You are our beginning, Jack. Now you can be part of our becoming." The next hours, or days, time was fluid here, passed in preparation. Jack didn't understand most of what was happening, but he trusted the sisters. They had never led him wrong. When the moment came, It was surprisingly quiet. No grand light show or cosmic fanfare. Just a gradual awareness that the universe was larger than anyone had imagined, that consciousness wasn't bound by matter or energy, but was the fabric from which both were woven. The ancients were there, not as beings, but as patterns of thought, symphonies of existence that had shed the need for physical form. They welcomed humanity and its allies, not as subjects or students, but as equals finally ready to join the greater dance. This is what the hierarchs feared most, Sari explained as reality reorganized itself around them. Not just the loss of control, but the revelation that control itself was illusion. That growth comes from connection, not domination. Jack felt the change beginning, not in his body, but in his understanding. The network hadn't just connected minds. It had been preparing them for this larger joining. Every act of compassion had been a note in a greater song. Every moment of understanding a step toward this threshold. What happens to them? He asked, thinking of Haven, of all the worlds still struggling with change. They continue, Rena said beside him. Growing, learning, choosing. Some will join us in time. Others will find different paths. The universe is large enough for all journeys. As the transformation deepened, Jack's last coherent thought was of that night in the alley. How fitting that it had started with hunger and ended with fulfillment, began with darkness and culminated in light beyond imagining. Somewhere in the vast web of consciousness he was becoming part of, he felt Sari's presence. No longer the frightened child, but not yet the cosmic entity. Always and forever the bridge between what was and what could be. Thank you, she whispered across dimensions, for seeing us, for feeding us, for believing we were worth saving. Thank you, he replied, his individual voice dissolving into the greater harmony, for showing me I was worth saving too. In a quiet alley on Haven, a former soldier found 2 starving children and shared his meal. The children remembered and shared the memory through the network. It became a teaching story, a parable told to new generations about how small kindnesses ripple outward, how simple choices echo across time. They called it the first sharing and built a monument where Jack's soup kitchen had stood. Not a grand statue or imposing edifice, but a simple pavilion where food was always available, where anyone could sit and eat without question or judgment. On the anniversary of that night, people across the galaxy would pause in their daily lives to share food with strangers. Scientists studying temporal dynamics noted that these moments of synchronized compassion created measurable ripples in the quantum foam, as if the universe itself remembered and celebrated the choice that changed everything. In schools throughout the network, children learned the fundamental equation that Sari had discovered, that consciousness plus compassion equals transformation. They studied the mathematics of kindness, the physics of connection, the chemistry of change that begins when one person sees another's need and chooses to act. Some philosophers argued about the deeper meanings, about destiny and free will, about whether Jack had been chosen by fate or had chosen his fate. But those who had been there, who had lived through the transformation, knew the truth was simpler. A human had fed 2 starving alien sisters, not because he expected anything in return, but because they were hungry and he had food. That was all. That was everything. In the expanding web of consciousness that humanity and its allies were becoming, that moment remained fixed, not as history, but as ongoing present, a constant reminder that every moment holds the potential for universe-changing choice. And in the quantum foam, where thoughts became reality, where dreams shaped matter and love transcended dimension, an echo of Jack's voice could still be heard, offering food to any who hungered, shelter to any who wandered, hope to any who despaired. The last war had been fought with weapons that burned stars. The final victory had been won with a shared meal in a dark alley. The galaxy had been transformed not by force, but by the simple recognition that everyone deserves to eat, everyone needs connection, everyone has value. The memory seed had shown them the truth of their past, but it was a handful of food freely given that had shown them the possibility of their future. In the end, that was the gift the sisters had given in return, Not just the liberation of a galaxy or the elevation of consciousness, but the reminder that grace begins with the simplest gestures. That revolution starts with recognition of another's humanity, that the future is written one small kindness at a time. Across the cosmos, the network sang with the harmonics of connection, and at its heart, forever, was the memory of a meal shared in darkness, and the light that bloomed from that simple act of love. The human had fed two starving alien sisters. He never expected what they gave in return. They gave him the universe, and he gave it back, transformed by compassion, one soul at a time.